Welcome back to the Blue Frontier. We are very pleased to be bringing you a special episode today. Our first official guest on the show is none other than Everton athletic correspondent and co-host of the Everton Byline, Mr. Paddy Boyland. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. I mean, I've spoken to you all collectively, individually, and I've always said how much I enjoyed your podcast and the work you guys do, providing something fundamentally different, I think, to a lot of other people. I really respect that. So great to be on and have a chat.
And thank you for joining us at a late hour over in the UK. So we're going to try to be mindful of your time, but we want to get right into it and start with some personal questions for you before we get into, of course, all the Everton stuff. Starting with a little bit about yourself. Who are you, Paddy? Where were you born, raised, and how you came to support Everton originally before eventually covering them?
Yeah, so I'm from the city of Liverpool itself, to the south of the city centre, a suburb called Egbert. So anybody that's been over on a trip to Liverpool and has been around Sefton Park, Lark Lane, you can kind of picture me in that sort of area. Not too far really from the new stadium. Easier commute than most, in fairness. So quite happy with most things to do with that compared to others. But born into a family of Evertonians. That's ultimately why I ended up following the club. My dad, my granddad, his brothers, sisters, everybody went to Goodison Park to watch Everton. So I think I started going very young. First game was around 3 years of age in the Gladys Street. First season ticket in the Gladys Street as well. And first season ticket year was Walter Smith's Everton. So towards the back end of the 90s, grim time where Walter tried to fit as many centre-backs on the pitch as humanly possible at any one time. I've sort of had memories of that at times this season, with some of recent team selections. Joined the Athletic in 2019, having followed Everton since I was a kid. Pretty much the dream job at the time. It's quite clearly tested my patience an awful lot in the preceding years, but I mean, it's still every day. I kind of every now and then I'll rub my eyes and think, there's Jack Grealish walking past us, or I've just interviewed Jordan Pickford, or I'm here on the first day of the new stadium. There's a lot to be thankful for.
One thing that I love is your situation, and now that you've got sources, the Athletic has sources all over the place. How often do you get asked by family members, what's going on with the club, and how do you handle that? Because I just picture that conversation at the dinner table, and just like, I can't, what do you say?
Well, I think my dad gets really frustrated because normally I'll see him, let's say Everton play on a Saturday.
With you or with the club?
Well, fundamentally with Everton, mostly with Everton, but definitely with me as well. And I think that's just the nature of the beast, the nature of the relationship at times. Say if Everton are playing on a Saturday and I'll go and see them on Sunday for some Sunday lunch, he will want to speak about as much of the football as possible, whereas I'm in complete no Everton mode. So there's always a bit of tension there, if put it loosely. I keep my cards pretty close to my chest, and I think that's something you learn as a journalist. You're there to impart information, of course, but also you're there to protect where the information has come from. So occasionally I'll let the odd tidbit slip just to keep him happy. I'll occasionally bend to his will and talk about the dramatic defeat where Everton conceded twice and had a player sent off in 8 minutes, whatever he wants. But yeah, it's always a delicate balancing act. I'm always trying to keep as much back as possible for articles and to protect the people who are speaking to us.
Paddy, when you were growing up, was journalism, writing, media something that as a kid you were really passionate about? When you kind of were going through the ranks, is this something that you saw as kind of your full-time career?
No, I don't think so. Not from a particularly early age. I probably had some of the tendencies you need to be a journalist, and I maybe realise that more now. So that the kind of reading everything, swatting up on every stat, piece of information before going to see games with my dad and my friends and family. But I think ultimately at the start it was a love of football, a love of the sport, whether it was going to watch it, whether it was going to play it. That was my, more or less my full-time thing from a very, very early age. I was a distinctly average footballer, so I think it became obvious pretty early on that I was not going to be doing that. And sort of fell into it as time went on. I went to university, didn't do a journalistic course, but I was doing predominantly English literature with languages. So you're doing an awful lot of writing, and certainly when I was living abroad, I lived in France for a while. I lived in Madrid in Spain for a year. Did a lot of writing in my own spare time about French football, Spanish football, a bit on Everton when I had the time. And I realise now that maybe from an early age I was being primed, bizarrely, to do this. I mean, one of the first things we did in primary school, so for us from the age of 5, 6, 7 years old, on a Monday morning was the teacher would ask us to write down what we'd done over a weekend and draw pictures. Now, in my case, I was much, much better at the writing side than the pictures. We still laugh now at some of those pictures. Everything was about the football. It was about how Everton did, what I'd eaten at the match with my dad, my emotions after the game, during the game, and after the game. And then they'd be accompanied by these ridiculous drawings, if we're being honest, where you'd have these almost like stick people with football boots, but studs that were more or less 3 or 4 times bigger than they should have been.
Did you have them tactically aligned too? Just kind of curious, like.
Yeah, they were playing kind of a fluid 4-3-3 system where the left side of midfield played in the half space. Yeah, that was when I knew, Ryan. That was when I knew I was destined for a
very advanced early.
Yeah, so I mean that kind of stuff obviously was great, and I'd always really enjoyed the sport. I'd always really enjoyed writing, so it logically just made sense, I suppose.
So you logically kind of fall into, as you mentioned, kind of a dream job, a dream scenario covering the team you've supported all your life, which you've now been doing since 2019, so going on 7 years. 7 years in, do you have a favorite part and a least favorite part of the day-to-day of covering Everton?
Yeah, I think you become a little bit immune to it over time. And it's actually the moments where you temporarily snap out of that and you realise where you are or what you're doing. You may have just done a really good interview after a game with Jordan Pickford, England's #1, or like I said, first day at the new stadium, where you're kind of rubbing your eyes and think, this is it, this is me, this is what we're doing. I mean, there's been every range of emotion in this job possible over the years, and I suppose that's just what Everton.
Not been dull, man.
It's certainly not been dull, and I suppose that's just what Everton as a club do to us all, never mind us as journalists, and we obviously have our own relationship with the club too. But kind of in terms of surreal moments, I remember being stood on the side of the Goodison Park pitch when Carlo Ancelotti is being unveiled as the Everton manager, annoying Marcel Brands to the point where he shouted at me to get off the pitch because I was ruining the grass. I mean, that was how much Marcel went into the minutiae of things. Those kind of moments where afterwards I'm thinking, well, first of all, he was being a bit of a douche telling me to get off the pitch, but then second of all, it's actually quite funny and a good story. So we've had everything. But
so it wasn't just the players; it was Paddy on the pitch too. Now, not just the players.
Yeah. We can blame the journalists for everything. So certainly, if I'm trying to think who the winger would have been at the time. I mean, somebody like Alex Iwobi. If Alex Iwobi slipped over, it was probably my fault.
He would never do that, though. He's Alex Iwobi. He's the perfect footballer. We all know that.
I know from having listened to this podcast, Ryan, that you're a big Alex Iwobi fan, and I still am. I think he was one of the unheralded members of that squad. Particularly good in the central midfield role, I think, under Frank, where he was probably being asked to do too much, but more or less was able to carry the can.
Yeah, see, Frank did do some good things. Decore might disagree with you, but, it is what it is.
Well, with Decore, going back to another surreal moment, interviewed him a few times over the years. One in Everton's pre-season training camp out it's kind of on the France-Swiss border on Lake Geneva. Stunning facility with views over the lake. And Decore, that was the summer when he just after when he'd scored the goal that kept Everton up against Bournemouth. So he was obviously really quite buoyant. Lampard had left. He'd been reintegrated under Dyche, and he could not bring himself to say Frank's name. It was always he or the previous manager.
Come on.
And even now, I still laugh about that because it was such kind of a visceral, bitter reaction to this guy who'd kind of left him out of the team and nearly prompted him to move elsewhere.
Yeah, what a moment that was. Paddy, want to kind of change gears real quick to just kind of a personal question. What are your favorite hobbies? Given that Everton seem to be playing every Monday and Tuesday now, you seem to have some weekends that are available, right? The amount of just weekday games are insane. But describe an ideal weekend when Everton aren't playing, such as, the last few, that you get a chance to kind of just unwind.
Yeah, honestly, it's trying to forget Everton exist. No, that sounds funny, given that's my job. But I'm so plugged into Everton on a day-to-day basis when I'm actually working that what I want to do is just step away from them completely. Often it's getting away from screens, so it's getting away from my phone, getting away from my laptop. The big mistake I made when I started this job was I used my personal phone. So now, whether it's my girlfriend or my mom or a contact that I need to speak to about a piece, they're all pinging me on the same phone, which is that was a rookie error, and one piece of advice I'd have for anybody kind of starting to come through now as a journalist. But it's really just it's getting away. So whether that's getting out into the countryside, we've got loads of cool places close to here, going on walks, bit of fresh air, playing sport. Really interested in cinema. I probably go at least a couple of times a month. And interested in things like reading and podcasts and stuff as well. I can watch football, but I watch far less football than I ever did before because mechanically in my brain, football is work. And even when it's not Everton, I'm thinking, what would I write about this game? Or what's the angle? What's the news implication of these players and what they're doing? And it's quite hard to escape.
Yeah, I hear that. I can definitely relate to that one. I think so. We also advertised that you were coming on to our lovely community. And so we've got a series of questions. I believe you've seen most of these. Hopefully there'll be no surprises. I'm a little tempted to kind of mess with you a little bit tonight, but I'm not going to. The first group of questions we had is people have had a lot of questions on kind of the Friedkin group coming in the takeover. And I'd like for full disclosure that my podcast hosts here immediately pegged me to one that they know is near and dear to my heart, and that's structure and things like that. But no, one of the guys in Discord, Sleazy, who's pretty active. Here's his question. He wants to know what significant organizational changes that you've seen that we've missed. Little things. I mean, you're around there every day, right? We know about the transfer committee, near and dear to my heart. But curious what you've seen on the scouting or the commercial side, or like the deal with the data company, the TFG bots, and to what extent it's been integrated and influences decisions. And really maybe giving an idea to the listeners, like how close you can get to those things and how that kind of works from your optic.
Yeah, so I think the big one there that you mentioned was the new footballing structure. I still think that happened, and this is my working theory, has been for a while, and is probably backed up by what I've heard from contacts in the game, that probably happened, I think, more by accident than design. My working theory is that one appointment kind of led to another and then forced Everton down a particular path, and that kind of, those short-term decisions and those short-term responses were what led to these things happening rather than kind of a well thought out and well executed strategy over an extended period of time. So kind of key pillars, I think, first of all, Sean Dyche. The ideal for the Friedkin group was for him to see out his contract.
Yeah, and that set it all in motion.
He senses an opportunity for a payday without officially resigning. So more or less immediately within a month of them coming in, the Freaking Group. They have to make a decision. It's a snap decision. It's Moyes, probably contrary to what others inside the club were counselling at the time. I think that changed the dynamic pretty fundamentally inside the club, particularly on the footballing side, with what was possible from other people. I think it erodes the director of football's influence. And then obviously the other big one was the appointment of Angus Kinnear over the summer as CEO. I think the impact there was that he is an advocate of the setup we see in front of us right now. That was his baby. He pushed it through. He's largely appointed the people he wants to appoint. And I do wonder if, had another name on that shortlist, for example, Brighton's Paul Barber, got the job, whether Everton would have this current structure now. I think the answer is almost certainly not, to be honest. So that's been the working theory, and I'm more convinced of that the more I speak to people and the more I think it through myself. I don't think that much has changed below. In a scouting sense, it's a lot of the same people, although some key pillars have left, and as far as I'm concerned, are still to be replaced. For example, they have an interim director of academy in Carl Darlington, but the stress there is very much on interim. That's not a role he's fulfilled before. James Vaughan leaving effectively left them with two voids, and I would say again they are still to be filled. You have interims in those roles. He was Loan Pathways manager and he was head of academy recruitment. We don't have permanent people for those roles.
James built the loan management thing from scratch too. I mean, we really didn't have a very defined structure on that too. So, and then he just kind of left.
Yes, yeah. So he's gone and joined Raheem Sterling's agency. I believe he'd always dabbled in the agency world. He'd been with Unique, one of the big British and German players in the market much earlier in his career, before going to Tranmere Rovers as a sporting director, and he's made that leap again. But I think the thing I would probably stress to your listeners is I think there was always going to be quite significant fallout behind the scenes from Kevin Thelwell in particular leaving. He'd appointed his own people. He'd built up a rapport with those people, and quite a lot of those have since left the club. You can go right the way through from Dan Purdy, the old head of recruitment, to Gareth Prosser, the academy director, James Vaughan. And in most cases, these, not Dan Purdy's, but most of these positions are still to be filled. The other thing to stress is that I think the bigger change behind the scenes has probably been in kind of a marketing, commercial sort of sector. They very quickly appointed people to maximise revenues, particularly related to stadium sales, stadium hospitality. They brought in a guy, Simon Hunter, from Chelsea to do that. They brought in a new head of digital and digital marketing, Aaron Duckmanton, who Angus Kinnear knew at Leeds and Crystal Palace. The club now is very much set up, for the first time in a long time, to eke out every penny. Make as much profits as possible, turn over as much money as possible. Not make as much profits as possible, because they're still a loss-making business. But I think that's the biggest shift I've seen, more so even than what Angus Kinnear and his acolytes are doing on the footballing side. It's that drive, more or less, day in, day out, to get Everton closer in a revenue sense. Not to the traditional big six, in quotation marks, but I would say the immediate competition. So Brighton, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Spurs to an extent as they drop off, Forest, those kind of clubs. That I think that's worth flagging to everyone, really.
Yeah, so Paddy, a lot there. And so you answered part of this next question, so I'm going to just ask the back half of it from Bluest, a really positive member of our Discord. Do you think that Dan Friedkin is using Roma as kind of their model for Everton? Or are they treating Everton completely different and looking at everything differently?
I think they do share information. I think obviously they have, through Pursuit Sports, the sort of the umbrella company for the sport, the management company for their whole sports portfolio. They have bought Chris Howarth's data company, Inside Sports, and that is used not only by Everton but by Roma and AS Cannes in France. So they are sharing. I don't think that's particularly deep so far because of how little time they've had to implement these structures. But the message we got when they acquired Everton was that they very much wanted to run these clubs separately. And part of the idea behind it was, we'll be there when you need us, and we'll be there to sign off all the important decisions, which they do, religiously, I'd argue. But we want to give a degree of autonomy on a day-to-day basis to these local teams, as they would call them. So that very much Angus Kinnear, the CEO, is the eyes and ears of the Friedkin Group in England on Merseyside. So I think they have probably learnt lessons from Roma. It's quite unfortunate for fans of that Italian club that they were sort of the guinea pig, in the sense that they made a load of mistakes. They spent a load of money, recruited, came to Everton knowing they'd made a lot of those mistakes and kind of almost vowing not to do that again. And one of the things that I picked up on quite quickly was that there's far less emotion so far in the decision-making at Everton. There was almost a feeling that they were too emotionally involved in some of the Roma decisions, and that can lead you astray when you're making those decisions. That they're trying not to be that way with Everton. But I think it's easier when they are a year and a bit in, as opposed to 5, 6, 7 years with Roma.
Yeah, I remember when the Friedkin Group first purchased Everton, we did a look back kind of at their initial transfer windows with Roma and saw some of those same mistakes. And, time will tell as things unfold with Everton but it seems like very early on they're at least avoiding those glaring errors. They may still find, of course, new errors to make. But in regard to the committee, which we talked about just a moment ago, this is a hot button topic, not just on this pod, but I think throughout the Everton fandom. Have you picked up on any differences between how Everton operated in January and the summer? Given that obviously the summer was really abrupt, a lot of people being put in place and then certain key figures not yet in place. And in January that had at least sort of been established. Everyone was mostly in their role.
Yeah, I don't think I picked up on that much difference between those two periods. I mean, the one that stands out to everybody, of course, is just the lack of business in January compared to the summer. But we were told over summer to expect things to be done summer after summer. Probably the thinking was it would take 2, maybe 3 summer windows, to overhaul this squad, and that they would only really dip into the market in January if there was a glaring need, if there was an injury crisis, or if they were in the wrong part of the table, or there was something they felt really, really needed to be addressed. I actually think the biggest change is probably still to come. I think you look at when James Smith, the new director of scouting, Dan Purdy's replacement, came in. I mean, he officially, and I emphasise the word officially, that he officially started at the end of the transfer window after completing his gardening leave from summer transfer window, after completing his gardening leave period at Manchester City. And he's only had one January window to assess, to look at the structures, who's left, what they need. As far as I'm aware and as far as I'm told, that process is very much still ongoing and may lead to further changes down the line. So, for example, I wrote relatively recently in a piece on, I think I was looking at Tyler Dibbling versus Ryan after the Bournemouth game. I wrote in that while Everton still have a presence in South America, they still have the scouts that Thelwell and Purdy hired in Argentina and Brazil, one apiece. What we're actually seeing across the league, and I think Everton will mirror this, is a dwindling pool of scouts. clubs reducing their on-the-ground scouts in favour of more video scouting, more data scouting. So I think first of all we need to see new appointments to fill the roles that have been vacated, but I also think we will see a change in the way Everton's recruitment operation works coming into the summer. And I think then that will be a better comparison than last summer to January. I think last summer to next summer will be where we see the biggest change for me journalistically.
I think the tack onto that one then is change from the previous regime and kind of this one. You got into it a little bit, but I mean, can you tell what types of players they're looking at? Is it different? Demographics, different areas? Negotiations, I guess, is a little bit different under Hammond. I mean, he's kind of the one that leads that. I don't know if any details that you see that you feel like are different other than just the personalities in the room. Now, obviously, David Moyes is going to have influence, and he's the head of a lot of things right now, but I don't know, kind of what feelings are you getting in terms of their, I will say this too, the previous regime had some ideas on maybe how they wanted to recruit and didn't necessarily do it. So maybe it's hard to tell.
Yeah, I think obviously Moyes' role in this is absolutely crucial. I still wonder how the structure as it is now functions without him. Say if Everton were at some point to pivot to a head coach kind of younger head coach kind of model where certainly quite a lot of those guys aren't heavily involved, don't want to even be involved in the recruitment process. Moyes very, very much does and is at the centre of this process. So how they manage that, I think, is one thing to keep an eye on when they eventually change manager. The rest of it, I think, is still to be seen. But I think one of the things that I noticed very early doors was that they were quite obviously making more of a play because of their increased wealth, effectively. More of a play for that, I'd say, 24 to 27 bracket. What David Moyes or Angus Kinnear will probably class as your Premier League proven types. So I think that's why Kieran Dewsbury Hall comes in or Jack Grealish comes in. I can't imagine a situation where the old regime signs, even with the money that Everton have now, signs Jack Grealish. They may have been more on board with Kieran Dewsbury Hall if they felt that was going to fill a gap. But
I don't think at that price. They did like that player, though, for sure, but I don't think they would have signed. That was a lot of money to play. He's a good player, though. Probably not. You're probably right.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is I wouldn't expect Everton, and these may be famous last words, but I wouldn't expect Everton to be that funky in their recruitment. I wouldn't expect them to be dipping into the Brazilian second tier. I wouldn't expect signings from the French third tier. I don't think that's really what Moyes and Kinnear and people close to them are really about. I think ultimately a lot of the signings, if we get signings from elsewhere, it'll be La Liga, top European leagues. So I think maybe slightly, and I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, but maybe slightly less, slightly risk averse, slightly more risk averse than certainly Thelwell and Purdy, who would have quite happily at various points gone to Denmark to pick up Mohamed Kudus when he was younger. I mean, they tracked him for so long, multiple missed attempts. That to me seems to be the signing that I couldn't imagine Everton making right now.
So close, so far.
So another kind of question getting to the summer, Paddy. This is from Drew Morgera. What can we realistically expect from a summer spend perspective? Is it all hinging on Europe? And we've talked about that at Fault at Pod, because it seems like our fan base, whenever we win, it's Europe, and whenever we lose, it's the bottom has completely fallen off. But I think just in general, maybe kind of do you think placement affects how we act in the summer, or do you just think that the team is going to be aggressive or not?
Well, it has to some extent, because there's a huge difference in terms of prize money, and therefore what that means in terms of PSR, SCR as it will be from next season, wriggle room financially. The more money you earn, the more you have to spend effectively. So it will do. I think for me the truly transformative thing is maybe not getting into Conference League or even Europa League, because those competitions actually, in my opinion, give you a pretty pitiful outcome in a
Conference
financial.
League is minimal. Even if you won it, it's not.
It's negligible.
Yeah,
It's
you'd
negligible.
have to have a great youth academy just as excuses to play them. Yeah, there's some risk there. You guys talked about it recently on the Byline too, which I thought was a good conversation.
Yeah, so I mean, what you get from that is actually relatively insignificant, I'd argue. And we know that maybe if Everton do squeak into Europe, let's see. But we know that Everton will almost certainly not be a Champions League side next season. So I think it will have an impact. The club still, as far as I'm told, has to be mindful of the profitability rules, the financial rules. That they're still loss making. They've still got some heavy losses to work their way through over time, so still consideration. I'm told they still feel as though they're in a position where they have to get everything right and they can't afford to make a mistake, which is partly why they refrained from doing any business in January at a time when I think it's more risky. And then I think the other thing is that there will be backing to some extent. That was always the plan. I think it will be maybe not quite as expansive as what they did last summer, but we're talking similar sorts of direction. Like we say, this is a 2-3 year project in terms of overhauling this squad. I look at it and there's still a whole load of gaps. I know they feel as though there are a load of gaps as well. I would expect, for example, right back, left back to both be on the agenda.
Wait. Are you suggesting we need a fullback? Is that really? Right back?
I mean,
think we need that one?
Yeah, I am. It might shock everybody, but I think Everton need fullbacks, and I think they need them pretty
You don't think we
badly.
can continue to play with 4 center backs, Paddy? I mean, the Walter Smith days, as you mentioned.
I'm sure we could. I'm sure we could try to do that, but I would hope not. I mean, it's amazing what 4 centre backs does to you, because immediately I was craving Nathan Patterson, and again that was something I never thought I would say as an Everton reporter at this moment in time. Just anybody who is an actual right back to provide balance. It's amazing, really. I remember in Carlo's time at the club writing pieces, and I can still go and find them now and on the internet, in the internet archives, where I'm talking about how Seamus Coleman's 32, 33, Everton need to find a long-term successor, and arguably we're still not there all these years on. So yeah, they will do business. I think they will be backed, but it can't just be carte blanche to go out and spend with reckless abandon. That there has to be some sense to it. There has to be some thought process behind it. I don't think they'll stretch beyond limits.
I think some pragmatism probably warranted, but I think we've run it into the ground on this pod, as I think the whole fan base has the obvious needs of the squad. Maybe switching gears, Paddy, because this has been a very significant year for Everton in many ways, but I think probably the biggest has been the move to the Hill Dickinson Stadium. And you were at, I think I was just listening to the Blue Room the other day. Has been almost just over a year since the first test event, which is kind of crazy to believe. But we're almost all the way through the first full season at the new stadium. So curious, like, what the transition's been like. You mentioned at the top, maybe a slightly easier commute, and I'm sure that the accommodations for the press room are probably a little bit improved. But overall, how do you rate the experience, and what do you make of the kind of complaints or the criticisms, maybe we call them, of the rest of the fan base over the move? Do you think it's kind of a temporary thing, just adjusting to the change, or do you feel differently?
Yeah, I have to be honest. I find it difficult to picture some of the problems Everton fans are having, or say they're having, with the new stadium right now. And that's not me saying I don't believe them. It's just me saying that I follow this very particular path. When I go to the game, I'm in this part of the stadium, and my experience is pretty singular. So I've not experienced it the way they have so far. I've not been as a fan, and that's actually one of the things that's on my agenda this year. I just want to go to one game with my dad as a fan, experience it, go into the South Stand or wherever it may be, and do it that way, like we did in the old days. So I'll speak first about as a member of the media. It's a completely different world, obviously, to Goodison. There were times, as I think most people will know, where I struggled to see the corner kick taker to the right of me, particularly when Dwight was taking a corner from that side and swinging a ball in from the right. I actually could not see him. There were other times where I actually was blocked from. I remember Tom Cleverley for Watford taking a really important penalty, and back then I was sat in a different seat. I actually couldn't see the penalty. I was doing live commentary, but I was basing it all on the reaction from the Everton fans. That's just mad, obviously, in this day and age. There were other moments when you'll all have been there and seen the press box at Goodison. It was so crammed that when every seat was filled, I actually could not type with both hands. I would, and I'm doing this impression. This is not very helpful for just people who are listening, but I would just be typing with one hand like this. It was ridiculous because we did not have enough. We did not have enough room. So going to Hill Dickinson obviously is a dramatic upgrade. It, in my opinion, was a much needed upgrade in all senses. And I'm not just talking about for me as a journalist, but I think for the club to compete in the modern era with the revenues you need. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, we all went to the stadium, and most of us loved the experience against Brighton on the August bank holiday with the sun out, when everybody could go to the pubs and walk to the match and all those kind of things. I think the winter, because of where the stadium is, negatively affects people's moods, people's journeys. They're less inclined to walk, which is what actually the club would like people to do more of. That's not going to be possible when it's windy and raining and all that kind of stuff down there on the Dock Road. And I also think results, obviously. We're hearing more about the negative side of the stadium because Everton on the pitch are not winning games of football. And I think there's a obvious correlation there. So that's not to dismiss any of these issues, but it's to say that this stadium is year one. It's going to be a learning process. There's loads of wrinkles still with everything from the transport infrastructure, the non-existent infrastructure around the stadium, all of which needs to be built up over time, to even some of the stuff that Everton are doing inside and just outside the stadium as well. Light shows aren't for everyone. I've had a conversation the other day with an Everton fan who hates the light shows and was really keen to tell me that. I've had lots of conversations with Everton fans who left in the pouring rain after the 3-0. It was 3-0 against Tottenham, where a DJ was just starting their set outside the ground. That did not go down well. So there's loads, but remember we were in Goodison for 133 years. That took an awful lot of time to adapt, to change, to feel like home. I think we're just starting out on this path, and ultimately I think Everton have a better stadium. They'll get there. But there are problems. There are problems, for sure.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, every time you move into a new stadium, routines have to be built up. It's just hard when you leave something that's so beloved. You know, normally times you move into a new stadium, the other one was, on its, Goodison. Bill Kenwright said it was on its last legs. But anyway, transition a little bit. You talked about the physical conditions. One thing I always thought is interesting is it's hard for me to see you writing for someone else, like getting to know you a bit. So I don't know if you want to talk about, you talked about a little bit about what you like about the job and whatnot, but what about the athletic that you feel like suits you? I just think this is kind of like a little bit of an insight into you, talking about that model and the desire to be correct and accurate, not so much being first. Maybe talk a little bit, you referenced it before, kind of keeping tidbits behind. And it seems like you do that for stories too. I mean, I would imagine there are probably a couple different storylines going around in your head at any one moment. So yeah, just maybe talk a little bit about that. I think our listeners would find that kind of interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's a good fit for me. What we started out as when we launched in the UK in 2019, I think, is very different, vastly different to what we are now. Back then, everything was long form. We weren't actually, bizarrely, we weren't publishing pieces of a weekend, which I think is ridiculous when you consider how much of sport happens over a weekend. There was no news operation as such, and really there was no pressure on us as journalists to chase the newsy angle. The product now feels very different, for good, mostly. Sometimes maybe not so good, but I think overall it's a much better product than it was. I think I've always seen the job, certainly this one covering Everton, as being about covering as many bases as possible. What I mean by that is I want to write about the academy. I want to write about the structures behind the scenes, what's happening in the community, what's happening with the stadium. At times you become, I would say, kind of an amateur accountant with Everton, because you have to be with where they've been in a PSR sense.
Please don't even get me started. Well, it's worse when you are an accountant.
Well, it's crazy, man. I at various times have had to go through Everton's accounts forensically, if possible, with no accounting background, and go, oh yes, this is interesting, and this is a red flag, and so on. And
On your green hat.
Over time, you get used to it. I mean, internally, because I cover PSR more than just about anybody else at the company, people occasionally kind of say to me, oh, you're the kind of the PSR guy, or you're the stadium construction guy. And I still don't know what half of those terms mean, with kind of pylons and stuff for the new stadium. So yeah, it's really enjoyable, but I want to do a bit of everything, and I'm allowed to do a little bit of everything. So people will see that on Friday I've written about the other Pickford. I went to Southport on Tuesday night, absolutely freezing, and watched one of the worst games of football I've ever seen, a 0-0 between Southport and Buxton in the 6th tier of English football. George Pickford, the player I was watching, I don't think he had a proper save to make. The highlights were him catching a bouncing ball and him passing to his midfielder. But there's a wider story there with him and what they're doing there and why they're doing it, and I suppose the prospects behind the scenes. That they've got another talented young goalkeeper, Everton, in Doug Lukancic, who now will get more exposure to under 21 minutes at an early age, and that's what I like about the job. I like being able to pitch these ideas. Most publications would go, no, what the hell are you doing? Write something newsy. But we do a little bit of everything, so that works. And then to Ryan's point about being accurate, that's the non-negotiable. We would love to be first and right. I think we have a good record of being first and right. But I would rather be second and right than first and categorically wrong. So we check and check again. Most people, I think, who read our kind of transfer deal sheet stuff, as it's called, will know that we give both clubs on a deal right of reply. I flippantly at times have asked my editors what happens if Everton sign a player from Ecuador's 3rd division. Am I sending messages to their communications team at whatever time? But we've not got there yet, thankfully. So yeah, that works for me. The reputation is the most important thing, making sure that we're right. So that's what we'll continue to try to do.
By the way, the Blue Frontier would have watched said player from the 3rd division of Ecuador. Just want to make that clear to everyone on the listeners. We'd be there for you.
Good. I expect nothing less.
It's just nice to know that Paddy's not doing what like Indy Kayla does nowadays. So, but speaking of memory lane, Paddy, I think this is a really good segue. This could take an entire pod, so of course, just you could be brief on this question. What have been some of your best and worst moments covering Everton, and do you find from the journalism side of things has impacted kind of the way you support or feel about the club in any significant way, especially the last few years?
Yeah, so I think that last point is really interesting, because going from fan to journalist covering the club changes your relationship fundamentally with the institution, with the club. You go from, I suppose, watching from the outside and being critical at times and being positive at others, to having to look under the bonnet, assess everything on a day-to-day basis. And like I say, I kind of run for the hills whenever Everton don't have a game for a week or two. So that changes. Sometimes you see things you don't like. Sometimes you, as I have done at various points over the last, well, not this season and not the second half of last season, but before then, worried about the very existence and the future of the club, and even what that might mean for my job at the Athletic. So there's definitely that. I think that's the one thing that immediately springs to mind here. The worst memories are just seeing the club in extremis, seeing how close they got to the brink at various points. Before the Bournemouth game, where Everton stayed up, I actually could not sit downstairs in the press room at Goodison. I was so full of nervous energy that I just had to walk around. So that was a moment that will live with me forever.
It's not the Watford draw, Shan, while you're on it? Is that what you wanted to bring up? Is that where you're getting at?
No, I mean, I thought he was going to bring up like the Just Stop Oil guy coming on the field and just the black cat. I think Paddy's answer is, as expected, much more professional and accurate.
Yeah, so just to pick up on that, obviously, that was one moment that will live with me forever. The 777 stuff, both as a follower of the club, but also a journalist, having to grapple with that idea of this is the one thing that's stopping Everton right now from not being able to pay the bills, and yet you really don't like what you're hearing and what you're seeing, and having to kind of grapple with that internally, more or less on a day-to-day basis. We've also had moments where kind of the club and the fan base has had loads of friction. It's more or less been civil war, and we'll all remember those moments vividly. As a journalist, you never want to be the story, but somehow some of the journalists around that time did end up being the story. That was an odd time where you kind of question everything. You question kind of your associations, whether you belong or not, which is mad to say, but I've definitely had those moments before. And then on a more positive note, it's all the stuff. It's like going to the press conference and seeing Carlo Ancelotti for the first time, or doing what you consider to be really cool interviews. Like I loved the interview I did with Tierno Barry earlier this season. First time he'd spoken. He did it all in French, but was so considered and so measured, and the story was so great that kind of they're the moments as a journalist that you really enjoy. So there's been loads of highlights, loads of everything, loads of ups, downs, bits in between. And that's where it feels Everton are right now, in that kind of in-betweeny things where things aren't really great. They're not terrible, but I can at least breathe a sigh of relief knowing that for now, the financial stability of the club has been secured for a while. I mean, that is something I couldn't say 3, even 2 years ago.
Yeah, the next one here is, this question is such a Manhania question, It's a pretty funny one, but it's somewhat related. His question is, there have been a number of sliding door moments at Everton in the past 10 years or so. I mean, these examples are so absurd. I love it. What if Tosin doesn't get hurt on loan? They were really going to pay $30 million for him, by the way. What if we fire Rafa before he has a chance to drive Brands, Dean, etc. out the door, or doesn't approve the Livramento transfer? We're going to keep that story. I know you've got a lot in your back pocket about that time. Maybe for the book one day, Paddy.
Yeah.
What if we hire Arteta instead of Don? In your opinion, what is the most significant of those moments, and why? I mean, you kind of hit some of it. I mean, we're on the brink of collapse, but I'm kind of curious if you have one that maybe you haven't mentioned that you find interesting.
No, I think just to stress, I think there have been various junctures where Everton have been pretty close to the precipice, whether it be because of relegation, the Bournemouth or Crystal Palace games, or even just 777 in that situation where Everton were potential then collapse of the deal. And I think it was absolutely crucial that the Freaking Group stepped in when they did. It's hard to foresee any of this, I suppose, without them and without that intervention. I would like to. I mean, I feel like I'm obsessed with this period, but I would like to. I don't think it's the most important, but I'd like to talk about the Marcel Brands appointment and how that turned out, because I still think there's a parallel universe in which he comes into Everton, has the right structure with him, is allowed to properly shape what's taking place at the club with proper resource, is less kind of inhibited by the people around him. I mean, at that point, everybody was feeding in. There were a load of voices. I think it's the same as well, even for somebody like Steve Walsh, who was much maligned. I think that there's an argument that Steve Walsh was, like others, thrown under the bus at Everton in a whole host of ways. So I think Marcel Brands, though, was kind of fundamentally, I felt, a good appointment. I felt as though he had a lot of the tools you need to build a club. And obviously in the Netherlands, they used to call him the architect because of his work at PSV. And I'd love to have seen a situation where he was actually given a proper chance to flourish, because what he got at Everton was a load of interference and really not much help at all.
I wonder if we'd have stayed healthy and snuck into, either Europa or something with that team and it stays together. It'd be interesting. It still maybe wasn't the right transfer strategy, but you're right. That would have been really alternate universe. Shan, I think you're going to start one here. So we've got so many other questions we want to get into, Paddy. So we're thinking about maybe trying a little rapid fire round to see how that goes.
Let's do it.
You ready for that? You sure?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Sean, you
Paddy,
cue it up.
Paddy, this is a question that's probably the most important out of any for the Discord. What is your favorite fruit?
Am I allowed to?
See, he's doing what I do. See, you give him the same crap
Just
you give
one,
me
just
then.
one.
All right.
How about you say your first and then you say honorable mention? Does that work?
Okay, so I'm going to say, and this is typically English, so I'm going to go into kind of cliche category here, but strawberries, particularly British strawberries in summer, very, very hard to beat.
Very Liverpool.
An honourable mention to pineapple. I think pineapples.
Would you say the British strawberries are better than the British fish and chips?
See, it was supposed to be rapid fire round. You've already sent us down.
Yeah, and they're healthier as well, so let's go with that.
Perfect. Favorite place you've been to in the U.S.? I know you've made a few trips over.
Chicago takes some beating in the summer. That was a fantastic
Summer
trip.
Chicago's awesome.
It was so good. It has just about everything you would want, and I say that knowing that I would absolutely not cope with the weather there right now. The cold winters, 0 degrees using our metrics is cold for me. So I mean, I've seen -18, -20 in Chicago recently. Chicago, honourable mention if I'm going to do that again, to Colorado, just because I maybe was not expecting what I saw there, what I got there. Lovely part of the country that I knew little about. Green, really friendly people, loads of cool breweries and stuff. So I had a great time in Colorado too.
I mean, Sean can obviously put you on a couch. All right. I like this one. TJ Bureau. Who is the player criticized by the supporters most unfairly? This is a dangerous one. Watch out. You're starting to get in Ryan territory on this one, and you don't want those responses.
Tiano Barry.
Interesting.
I like the pick.
Yeah.
Great pick.
It kind of ebbs and flows with him. I think we started off, and because he was not scoring, he, for some people, was not a good striker, period. Even though I think most people realised that it was a 22-year-old lad at the time, adapting to a new language, league, culture, team, all that kind of stuff. I think then obviously he had his purple patch in front of goal where some of those finishes really were quite impressive. I mean, the one against Aston Villa, still I look at that on his weaker foot and think that's like top tier in terms of potential, in terms of finishing. Even the goal against Leeds, I loved the movement to the front post and the ability to fire it before the keeper had even really before the keeper was even able to put their hand up. So I would say Barry. I think now we're back in a period where we micro-analyse so much of what he does. we take a lot of the bad, maybe without focusing on the good. I mean, for example, the Brighton game away recently, I don't think he had a particularly good game. I think he, not only was he isolated, but I think he struggled maybe physically with some of those Brighton defenders. Thought the same in the last game, by the way, with some of the Bournemouth players. I don't think they were good games for Barry, but against Brighton, he creates probably two Everton's two biggest chances, particularly with some really smart play for Dewsbury Hall. I'm struggling to think of others who are kind of unfairly maligned. I think in general, Everton fans tend to pick on the right ones. If it could be cruel.
I think your piece, just real quick before we move to the next question, your piece did a really good job kind of contextualizing for a lot of people, I think, the journey, the meteoric rise he's been through in the ranks of football, and humanizing him quite a bit. And I think we've been defenders of him and his trajectory and where he is at in his career on this pod, but I think I'd agree with that take.
Can I say Tyler Dibbling as well?
Yeah, that's another one. Good show.
I don't know how we're meant to judge this lad when he plays 10 minutes and then is not seen for 4 weeks. I just don't think you can really make much of a case either way on his ability based on those really small fleeting cameos. I loved his performance against Nottingham Forest. I thought we saw good things from him against Burnley, even though for me it was a less complete performance than the Nottingham Forest one. But my question with him was always, we knew Illiman Ndiaye was going to AFCON. We knew he would be needed, Dibbling, and I never felt as though he was placed in a position during that period to necessarily succeed to the best of his ability. So I would like to argue that with young players, we need to give them time, we need to give them patience. Tiano Barry and Dibbling are the same for me.
Here.
To transition to unemployment, what was a fair criticism of Sean Dyche and what was unfair? So this question is also from TJ. Kind of the follow-up to this is he thinks Moyes and Dyche seem similar in a way, but Moyes seems to be treated more charitably. I think just, of course, his Everton past and what he's done. But, I mean, you look at the results, too. They're pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I would start by saying that I think Moyes is a much better manager in some ways than Sean Dyche. I see quite a lot of similarities between the two, actually, but I just think Moyes is more advanced. I think he builds in possession teams better. I think a lot of his work over an extended period of time shows that he is a better manager. And let's be honest, Sean Dyche had arguably, comfortably the best squad he's had in his career at Nottingham Forest and did not do particularly well with it. I felt we saw his limitations there. So that for me is the main thing. I think the message... I laughed when I saw the message coming out of Forest after he was dismissed. I laughed when I saw those very athletic-y style pieces, the inside, the departure, inside the demise, where the players were talking about basic training, a focus on running, a lack of kind of attacking patterns, because I had written the same thing probably 12 months, if that, earlier. So that I think is a fair criticism. I think that's where he falls down. What I would do is I'd give him an enormous amount of credit for the job he did initially at Everton.
For sure.
And maybe not just that period where he kept Everton up against Bournemouth, because I think that's not the most impressive stint. It was the start of the following season where Everton really did play well, not just in terms of results and performance, but even the underlying numbers. It was all really quite strong. I mean, I was getting messages at the time from people in football and people I really respect, and they were saying to me, what Sean Dyche is doing with this team right now is incredible based on the actual...
Job. I mean, impossible job.
The actual talent. So
even just the points deduction, right? How he handled it.
Yeah, for sure. So I think he was kind of the logical fit to get Everton through in that austerity era. He was the logical fit to get Everton through particularly that first wave. And I think he deserves enormous credit for helping Everton then, at that point.
He changed the story, Sean. It's so bad. God,
you love that
sorry.
Every time you love.
I had to say. I mean, just what is a Blue Frontier pod without saying change the story?
Change the story. Someday we'll get past.
Did you see the recent interview where I can't remember which game it was, but Forest had lost, and he came out and he spoke about how the players that had been signed from abroad was still learning the nuts and bolts.
It's
And
unbelievable.
I mean, at that moment in time, whenever I'm on the job and I'm
But
working
you
with
had
these
to
guys,
sit in the room when he's doing it too. Like, I mean, it's got for you. It's just Chris. It probably brought you right back.
yeah. So in those moments, I'm as balanced. I will try to be as balanced as I can be. But when I then hear that a year on, I just laugh. It just brings me right back to some of those press conferences where he'd speak for 20 minutes and then I'd look through it and go, no, that's management speak, and we're not going to use any of it. And that's from a peace point of view.
Very reasonable. Switching back, a couple more questions for you, Paddy, then we'll let you go. I know you mentioned going to see George Pickford play on the South Coast. There's been a lot of talk about Braden Graham lately with his performances. Sludvigs from our Discord wanted to know, besides those, maybe a couple names, if there's any other youth prospects that stand out to you.
Yeah, so I don't think they've got anybody that's kind of Harrison Armstrong level potential right now. I don't see that. I don't think the club sees that either, which is why over summer when 12 players left, they looked to the market rather than the academy. People can criticise them for different things, but I don't think that's really one you could blame them for. There wasn't anybody that was ready-made at that time to come in. I like George Pickford. I like Doug, the other goalkeeper. I think they're decent prospects. People speak highly of them in the game for where they are now, but there's still a whole load of development to go. And I'd say George Pickford was playing in the 6th tier of English football, so quite far away still from Premier League. I like Malik Olaiwola, who has played quite a lot for the 21s this season. Mostly played, even at 16, playing for the under-21s. England age group international, scores a lot of goals for his position, gets in good positions, which is why I think for the 21s he's been used a lot as a number 10. Most people I speak to think he's going to be a box-to-box when he grows a bit, when he's able to cope physically. So he's an interesting player. And then his midfield partner as well for the under-18s, Demi Akarikiri, a signing from Arsenal. I've liked what I've seen from him in terms of the way he moves with the ball. That's a real strength. I just think he needs to tidy up a bit on positional play, his passing at times. So there are a couple of interesting players to watch, but I mean, I don't think if anybody's expecting the next Harrison Armstrong to come through over the next 6 months, I think you'll be disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, we don't produce wingers like Harrison Armstrong anymore. It's too easy. It's too easy. Okay, here's one. We were supposed to make these rapid fire. I think we failed. But this is a good question, though. I like this one. I'm not going to say who this is from. People don't know, our listeners. Like, we have a document when we do this. I know it maybe sounds chaotic, but we're actually pretty organized. It just doesn't seem like it, maybe. All right, is there a player who nearly signed for Everton but didn't at the end that sticks out in your mind?
I mean, I've just got a whole list from that Thelwell Purdy era. I think you can Kudus, Morgan Gibbs White. I think was a big miss.
They were close too, man. They thought they had him.
Yeah, that was there if they had the money. Joao Pedro, close. Brennan Johnson, Yankuba Minta.
This is traumatic for me.
I know. All these guys are. I mean, Johnson was pretty much done. Had
Sammy
they not got
Khedira.
promoted? See, there it is.
He did not nearly sign for Everton under Kevin Thelwell and Dan Purdy. I need to point that out.
He couldn't have physically made it from the airport, man. Like, I mean, what are we talking about?
I mean, he's still more mobile than some of the players Everton have been playing in there at times this season.
He's got more champions.
He would have played the same amount of games as Fabian Delph, right? So, like, let's not be. It's fine, you know. All right.
This could go down. This could go downwards very, very quickly. So, but yes, all good answers. Oh man, boy, that's
great
just
answers.
painful to hear.
As James said, pretty traumatic, but it's just good to know that our mind was in the right place. It's just execution once again was just our biggest nemesis. Paddy, I know we had a lot more questions. Of course, we're running a little bit short on time, so want to be sensitive on that. We're going to ask kind of one in-season question for you. And do you feel that kind of looking at the state of things as they have kind of fallen now, that Everton have met your expectations coming into the season?
I think Everton have exceeded my expectations in terms of league position. based on the squad that we see in front of us, and particularly when you consider this has been a team that's been without arguably its best player, certainly its best defender in Jared Branthwaite for just about all of the season so far, and until the last few weeks, Iliman Ndiaye and Idrissa Gueye during AFCON for, I mean, it was a month, but that felt like a year to me watching some of those Everton performances in that period. And what was it, kind of 6, 7, 8 games where they kind of sorely missed those players. I don't think Everton are the 8th best team in the league. I need to make that very clear.
Wait. Are you saying the table lies? I just want to make sure we quote you on that.
Yeah, I'm not going to commit either way. I'm going to give you a no comment on that, just so I don't annoy people.
Smart. But wise decision there. Wise. I think it lies. You can send your ire towards me. Thank you.
Yeah, I just think, this is the bizarre thing about football, and it's a low scoring sport. It's very random at times. I've seen Everton play much better in 3-0 defeats against Tottenham than I have in probably the 2-1 victory at Fulham, and that's where or even most of the game against Bournemouth. Most of the underlying numbers have Everton somewhere around 14th. Maybe they're a little bit better than that when you add in some of the quality. Maybe you also account for the fact that Jordan Pickford's a really good goalkeeper,
for sure,
and will save more than most. I think that just, for me, they're very, very middling. So I'd say they've exceeded my expectations, bizarrely.
I think that's a very fair answer, and I think we'd probably all agree. Going into the season, I think we were all content with a low mid-table, somewhere thereabouts finish, and it looks like we're probably well on track to get that.
Did you say 9th through maybe 15th?
Yeah,
is that
15th,
what you'd say?
infamously, is the target we're shooting for. And on that note, I think that's gonna do it for us. Paddy, thank you very much for joining us. We do really appreciate your time and your contributions and everything you do on both the Byline and for the Athletic. A voice of reason in the Everton world, which is obviously always sorely needed. So appreciate you joining the Blue Frontier for your inaugural appearance. We'd love to have you back sometime, but otherwise, it's been a pleasure. And for all of you listening, just a reminder: if you enjoy the show, leave us a rating and review, subscribe, leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of the episode. Otherwise, we'll be with you next time. Game against Manchester United on Monday. It's a big one, and we'll see you following that. Until next time, up the Toffees.